Alright people, today we are in Minneapolis. We crossed the river. We're in the garage of Mr. Joel.
Hello.
And he is going to take us on a stout exploration today to some scents. And this is actually the proper, the right proper glass, isn't it?
Yeah, my friend was in Ireland earlier in the year, and I got her to smuggle me a couple over.
Oh
so.
boy.
Yeah.
So, and he also has this fancy faucet, and we'll talk about that. Let's see this faucet in action.
All right.
We'll talk about this. This is a area I don't know much about. I know nothing about personally doing it myself.
Yeah, this is just my third batch on it, so this one has given me the best results out of any batch that I've done before. That's just like a really nice slow cascade on it.
Yeah, it sure is.
Takes a good, I timed it the other day. It's like 90 seconds or 120 seconds for it to like fully come up. But yeah, the carbonation level on it and everything is just, I think, just dialed in and perfect. So I'm really happy with how it's coming out.
That's great. We're gonna talk about why he likes this beer. Maybe we'll talk about your other. You did at least one other version of this recipe,
yeah,
right?
It was a different recipe. It was like a Beamish clone attempt. I just wanted to have some on tap at home because I had gone to Ireland once with a bunch of friends, and most of the stuff that we did was around Cork, and that's like Beamish is from Cork. It's kind of their version of dry stout, and it's the only place that you can get it. It's only available in Ireland, mostly only available in Cork, but it's in like every bar there, and had a lot of pints of this when I was over there, and I just kind of fell in love with it. So.
Cool. Well, we'll get into this, and he even has an actual can from Ireland.
Yep.
So we'll get into that too, and we'll get back inside in a minute.
Awesome.
There you bet.
So we're inside. We've got the pour that you just saw, and it's drinking very nice. We'll talk about that. And he also, I didn't do any footage of it, but he had a can from Ireland that you brought back, or someone brought back.
Yeah, earlier this spring, one of my friends from Ireland was in the States for a little bit, and he smuggled me a 4-pack, which is very nice.
Yeah, so we've got the homebrew and the actual original, which you do not get in the States.
Nope.
So that's always fun to try something weird like that. I think that Joel's beer is, and it has a nice light roastiness to it, a little bit of, quote unquote bitterness from that, from those darker grains. Yep. Of course, this beer is not going to have a lot of hops, and it's not about that. And you used Imperial Darkness yeast, which is an English-related
I think so.
strain, we think.
They recommend it for dark styles. I don't know what its origin is specifically, but it's like porters, stouts, imperial stouts. It has a high alcohol tolerance if you need it. Obviously, didn't need it for this. This is like 4.4%.
Okay. Do you know some of the other grains off the top of your head that you had in this one?
I know the base grain is the MCI stout malt. A pretty small amount of it. I forget, it might have been like 5.5 pounds. And then I believe it was chocolate malt and a very dark crystal malt as well.
Well, there's the other kitty. What's up, dude?
Hey, Willis. Yeah, he's nervous.
That's all right. So low alcohol.
Yep.
And what's your take on drinking it either on its own or also compared to the original?
Well, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I was worried with the recipe, especially with the crystal malt in there. I wasn't expecting that in a dry stout. Worried about it finishing low enough, especially with a yeast that isn't known for attenuating like bone dry or anything. But it definitely tastes like a dry stout. It very much tastes to style to me. It's interesting comparing the two. I feel like mine does have a little bit of a fuller flavor, and maybe that is what that crystal is doing in there. But it doesn't taste overly caramely. It's like light notes of that kind of fruity, but really dark. It's because it's a dark crystal.
And I think it finishes with a light bitterness too. From those, maybe the chocolate, or is there roast or black patent or anything like that you remember?
Here, I'm going to look up the recipe. The recipe is Michael Dawson's Beamish recipe. So there's an old Shop and Brew video.
Get that mash maker book.
Yeah.
Get it out.
The grain bill was 5 pounds 6 ounces MCI stout malt, 14 ounces UK chocolate malt. It called for 8 ounces of Patagonia C190. So I think 190 is the Lovabond.
I don't really know that one.
Yeah, they didn't.
What did you do?
They didn't have it at the brew store, and that's from what I was looking there. But this is extremely dark crystal. I think that I found the darkest that I could, and I think it was more around 160.
Okay.
Okay. And just subbed that in, and then 8 ounces of wheat malt.
Huh. So really, it's the chocolate, almost a whole pound of chocolate. I mean, that's gonna go quite a ways in that low of a grain bill.
Mm-hmm.
Small of a grain bill like that is gonna push those flavors and the color, and then also like another 8 more ounces of.
Yeah.
As we've seen in different brewing recipes, you don't need a lot of a higher kiln malt to give it
definitely
red, brown, even darker kind of notes.
Well, and with it being such a low alcohol beer, I worry about it being dark enough, but it's even being 4.5%. Like you hold it up to the light, and it's like a little bit of ruby around the corners, but it's black.
Well, I was just looking at the heads on each, and they look similar in this light, and from what I can see, so that would suggest that the beers themselves are, similar in color.
Yeah, definitely.
I think this one is, like you were saying, like it's a little, or maybe I was saying, it's a little lighter and smoother, and not necessarily in a great way. I mean, I find that the commercial Nitro canned beers, European, UK type beers, English, I suppose, Irish, Scottish, this kind of flatten out for me, like the flavors. I think it has to do with the nitrogen. And this one, is an example of that in my mind. Yours maintains a little bit more of a full flavor somehow, even though it is on Nitro.
Definitely. Yeah, and I don't know what what the recipe is for Beamish these days. I was telling you earlier that, now I believe Beamish is owned by Heineken, and I'm sure that probably the processes and the recipes have changed over time.
Could be. And
so this recipe I know is just based on descriptions of Beamish from back in the day.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's a really fantastic beer.
That's a good point. You may not be able to clone. I mean, if you're trying to make a similar beer, it's similar.
It's very similar. Yeah.
What can you how much closer can you get?
Yeah.
It's hard to. There's so many variables with size, scale, process. Big commercial brewery versus a small home brewer, and that's fun when you get this close.
Totally.
But I think drinks really nice, and it's fun to see on the nitrogen. Do you want to talk about real quickly about your either challenges or struggles or triumphs of using the nitrogen?
Well, Nitro is interesting for me because I didn't even know really how it worked before I actually got the setup and did my research on like how I would have to treat my beer to run it on Nitro. Because when I heard Nitro before, I'm like, oh, they use nitrogen instead of CO2, and that's what it is, and didn't know that beer gas was actually a different thing. And so a lot of you maybe know this, but for those of you who don't, the way that Nitro actually works is that the beer gas mix is like 25% CO2 and 75% nitrogen, or at least in that neighborhood. And then it's run at a much higher pressure, and the reason for that is that nitrogen itself doesn't really dissolve into liquid, whereas the CO2 does. And so since it's only 25% CO2, you run it at a really high pressure, but it's not going to overcarbonate. Like it's on the keg at like 30 psi right now, which if you had that on a CO2, you would have a mess on your hands pretty quickly. So basically then the Nitro is just an engine to like push it out at this really high pressure. And then the reason that the tap is different is that it's not just like an open pour kind of thing like on a regular tap. It's actually porting it down through a little restrictor plate in there that has like 5 little tiny pinholes in it. And so with a low level of carbonation that it sits at, I think it's like 1.5 volumes or so. When that goes through there, the little holes like knock that tiny amount of CO2 out of solution, but like in those super tiny bubbles because it's going through such a tiny little hole, and just like the force of that at that high pressure is like what gives you that nitro head. So it's actually just CO2. You know, you're still drinking a carbonated beer. It's just a lightly carbonated beer that's being pushed by steroids almost.
No, I did not know all of that either.
Yeah, it's apparently what Guinness developed back in the day when they wanted to have like a cask type experience that could be like marketed and sent out to pubs. And
you think Guinness developed that process?
I should fact check that.
Wow.
That's what I've heard.
Okay.
Why don't you fact check that?
Why don't I look it up?
I might be talking out of my ass right now.
Too.
But it's cool how it works though. And so the last couple of beers that I've done on Nitro, I had some mixed results on it, and this is the one that's definitely gone the best, and it's the first time that I used a carbonation stone on it. So before I was, just using the headspace and just getting that carbonation level just right, where it pours correctly through the Nitro. It's just like really hard to dial in. And so with this one, with using the carbonation stone, I was able to do it a lot more precisely, and it's bringing that beer gas up through like tiny little bubbles versus just being in the headspace. So I don't know. Maybe it's because I was using bad technique before, but this seems to have corrected it. Oh, that's true,
because the air in is just on the top. Right. Well, I think it's very delicious, and it's fun to get over here and see your kegerator set up and see the living room and meet the cats and drink these beers. Absolutely. And we will probably sign off for now. I've got a couple beers that we'll drink, and we'll get to those too. But thought it'd be fun to check out a different space and try some yummy Nitro beer. So thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right. Catch you later.